well-being for many years, and one of the biggest revelations from that meditation is that government enterprises can revolutionize capitalism. Capitalism today is a government that's extremely expensive and very much the kings of old used to make money, like Louis XIV or Henry VIII. This is an old way of revenue that has to disappear, and it can disappear if the government adds another branch to itself. It has national security, it has a justice, a judicial branch, it has many branches, but it doesn't have a revenue, which means enterprises, instead of collecting taxes, they can make businesses themselves. If an individual can become a billionaire like Jeff Bezos, right? Why can't a government become a trillionaire with its own investments as well? Why is it that a government always depends on taxes? Government revenue can come in many ways through enterprises. They can create an enterprise. They can buy an existing successful enterprise. They can seize an enterprise because it's a criminal enterprise or there has been some wrongdoing in that enterprise. They can actually seize that enterprise and make money with it for the profit of the government, which means for the profit of the people. They can create businesses run by prisoners. Prisoners are legal slaves of the government. Instead of sitting around in a jail cell, plotting a vengeance or thinking what went wrong or worrying about being attacked or raped, right? A prisoner is best corrected when it's working. In fact, there's a lineup of prisoners just wanting some kind of work because work makes a person sane. A criminal can become sane through work. Work is one of the best ways to become sane, no matter what your problem is. Work makes an honest person out of a soul, no question. So it's a win-win situation. Imagine an enterprise where prisoners are making electric cars for the government almost for free. They should have some kind of salary, but minimal, right? And the government is putting out electric cars for the masses, cheap, which would be a very good deed from the government. In business, the small fish becomes the big fish, right? It takes a small food cart to start life, a small business that eventually becomes bigger or becomes more small, then eventually a big business. So the government's interest would be a partnership with small business, aiding people who are worthy, people who are not going to steal the money, people who are actually going to use the money to build a business, and becoming partners with them, allowing them to flourish, creating jobs and creating profit for the government through the partnership. There are many, many ways that government can create revenue outside of taxes. I think taxes can be abolished within 100 years of government business or government revenue. Already in countries, the government owns the alcohol business or the lottery business, and they make billions out of it. Well, why can't we have 1,000 such businesses, right, that eventually basically eliminates the needs for taxes? Nobody really wants to pay taxes. Whether you're poor or you're rich, you don't like to pay taxes. So it's possible to eliminate taxes through the growth of government enterprises. The government needs business people in a branch of business of itself in order to grow business so big and so powerful that the need for taxation disappears. We can have a government that would be $22 trillion in the positive instead of $22 trillion in the negative. That's very much a possibility in business. How is it possible for enterprises like Walmart and Costco, which are gigantic, to make gigantic profits, right, and sell stuff cheap at the same time? It's because of volume. Walmart buys, not five, they would buy 1 million, 2 million of something so they can bring down the price. The same with the government. If the government would be in the construction business and order 400,000 apartments, they're going to get a 50% off rebate. And the people are going to benefit with cheap housing, basically. Government never thinks like a capitalist. The governments are not capitalist. The people are capitalist. The people create businesses with hard work, and they make a profit. The government doesn't have a clue about capitalism, even though they're capitalist governments, because taxation is kind of like a protection racket. It is not true capitalism. True capitalism, adult capitalism, is when the government itself is a capitalist, which it isn't. There are businesses that are just gigantic. Fractional reserve lending means that you can have 10% of the money and you can lend out 100% of the loan. The banks enjoy the privilege of fractional reserve lending. I think it's for free. I don't even think they pay for that, right? Which means if a bank has $30,000 in deposits, they can lend out $300,000 in loans. That's amazing. That's why the banks are some of the most wealthiest enterprises on the planet. Well, why can't the government do the same thing? Why can't the government become the bank or own banks? Why is it that the banks own the government? Why is it that the governments borrow money from banks who impose fractional reserve lending? I mean, there's a fortune to be made by banks who only need 10% of the loan in their account in order to lend the money. Why can't government do that? The government can build homes. The government can build cars. The government can build staples, food markets. Fundamentals of life can become extremely cheap, cheaper than Walmart, cheaper than Costco if the government gets involved. And at the same time, the government would be making a profit, a serious profit. Of course, when a lot of money comes into the government, you need some kind of auditor. You need some kind of accounting. Banks are wealthy because there's very serious accounting going on. And the government would need the same. You'd need a very much like an internal revenue kind of detective to see where the money's going. There's a lot of potential for fraud when there's billions or trillions of dollars floating around. In order to make sure that the people benefit, you need some kind of accounting that's very, very strict inside the government to make sure that the money doesn't just vaporize, as it sometimes does. So in conclusion, we need a different branch of government. They have a lot of branches. There's a lot of departments of government, but there's no department of business in government. There's no department of capitalism in government. Imagine a Warren Buffett working for the government at a very serious price. If you want a Warren Buffett working for the government, you'd need to pay him $10 million or $20 million, but he would bring in hundreds of millions of dollars in profit. So it is worth paying a Warren Buffett that kind of money if he's going to bring that kind of profit to the government. You know, there are very, very astute and smart business people who can work for the government. They usually don't want to have anything to do with the government. They see the government as a place that's just too complicated, too messed up. So the best people usually do not want to get into the government. That has to change. We need the best possible talent in the government. And if we want business talent, then we have to pay for that talent. The future can be revolutionized by a government that depends on capitalism and its enterprises instead of taxes.